The 2025 Major League Baseball trade deadline is in the books. A lot of crazy stuff happened. There were some clear winners, some clear losers. Some teams didn't do too much. But today I'm gonna tier list them. Look back at it in a few years. Hopefully, there's some good takes, maybe some bad takes. We're gonna see some outdated logos here that are kind of bothering me, like San Diego and Milwaukee. But it is what it is. So we're gonna kick it off with Toronto. Now the Blue Jays are first in the American League East. One of the best records in baseball. They've been really hot recently. In July specifically, taking over the division lead from the Yankees. And I think their bullpen is something they knew they needed to address. They signed Jeff Hoffman in the offseason. He kind of just hasn't been as dominant as they would like in the closer role. He's like a mid-4 ERA, I think. Just not totally ideal. And then they didn't really have anybody else to go to in that scenario. They DFA Chad Green, a long-term Blue Jay who hasn't been great recently. So they went out and they started the trade deadline season off by getting Sir Anthony Dominguez from Baltimore, a guy with some playoff experience, a right-hander having a really good year in Baltimore. And they traded their 10th overall prospect, I believe it was, Warren Watts Brown, for him. Then they went and got Shane Bieber early on trade deadline day for their 5th prospect, Cal Steven. I wonder if they kind of jumped the market a little bit because some of the prices were getting really steep as the trade deadline day was going on, and they were kind of early on those two moves. So they really didn't pay all too much. And then, if Shane Bieber doesn't have it when he comes back, I think he's slated to come back in like mid-August. Definitely a chance you take. They also added Luis Varland and Ty France from Minnesota. And Luis Varland is somebody, and Minnesota, completely cleaned out the roster. I'm surprised they traded Varland. He's a controllable arm who has the ERA just over 2. He's been really good this year. Adding him along with Ty France, who's a solid defender, who's hitting for like 250 this year. If you ever need to give Guerrero a day off, you can put Ty France in there. I think I'm gonna go A. I think if they didn't get the Varland deal done late on trade deadline day, that I probably would give it a B. But you get 2 relievers and a starter that could start a playoff game for you. I think it's an A. It's probably a lower A, an A minus, but it's definitely an A. And now the New York Yankees, we're going to go ahead and put them in S. I mean, they started it off by getting Ryan McMahon. They needed a third baseman. Their defense at third base hasn't been great. Their offense at third base hasn't been great. Jazz Chisholm Jr., not really a third baseman. They couldn't get it to work. Peraza struggled. Yorbeat Vivas had some mistakes he made. He hasn't played great. They needed an upgrade, and Ryan McMahon is a great defender. He was in Colorado for a long time. I think a change of scenery has helped. He swung the bat good early in New York. They also added Ahmed Rosario. They got Jose Caballero, who's tied for the league lead in stolen bases this season. They added Austin Slater, who hits lefties well. Of course, Judge is having some issues, so Slater's some depth there. And then they added David Bednar, Jake Bird, and Camilo Doval. Now, 2 of those guys are legit closing options, and Bednar and Doval, and Jake Bird, a solid reliever as well. This gives them depth. Luke Weaver has been overworked. He hasn't pitched as great recently in July after having a dominant first couple of months out the pen. Devin Williams, who's one of the best closers in baseball for a few years, just has not adjusted well this season for whatever reason. And a free agent at the end of the year, probably not coming back. This definitely kind of shuts the door on that. I think with Bednar and Doval both being controlled through next year and longer, in Doval's case, this is a great get for the Yankees. And the team that got to the World Series last year, I think they knew they just didn't have enough to compete with the Dodgers, and just getting as much as you can and getting the right things. Like even Rosario and Caballero is going to be good depth for you. Guys you can put multiple places on the field if you need to. If you need to give Volpe a day off because he kind of has the yips on defense right now, you can do that. I mean, it was a good day for the Yankees. It's definitely an S trade deadline. Now, the Boston Red Sox, this is going to be a D or an F right off rip. First of all, Fox on Sports, MLB on Fox on Sports or whatever, them posting that Joe Ryan got traded there, even though they misread the tweet from John Morosi, was crazy work. And they got these Red Sox fans going crazy over that. But besides the fact they couldn't pull off the Joe Ryan trade, getting Steven Matz for Blaze Jordan wasn't bad. I think Blaze Jordan has to be protected this year, or he's eligible for the 40 or for the Rule 5 draft. So not a big loss there. Steven Matz is a solid get. But this Dustin May trade they get really does not make any sense. He's battled some injury issues. He's has like a 4.74 ERA this year, I think it is. He's a free agent at year's end, so he's not even controllable through next year or anything. And they traded Zach Earhart, which is like their 27th prospect, which is, isn't too much of a loss. But they traded James Tibbs, a guy who can play some first base, play some outfield. They're obviously deep at outfield, at some infield positions. But first base is kind of the one position in the infield they're not deep at prospect wise. Like, who's going to be their first baseman in a couple of years? I don't know. And he was the 13th overall pick in 2024, I believe it was. And they just got him in the Devers trade. Trading that guy for Dustin May, who's not pitching at his best, is pretty questionable for me, and not doing anything else when you're really in the playoff hunt. And I think they're a team that could falter and fall out of the playoff race, even though they're in solid position right now. I think Seattle's going to get in. I think Texas, so, we're going to talk about these teams later. I think Texas might not have done enough to overtake Boston in my mind for that last spot when it gets to at the end of the season. I'm going to give it an F. That Dustin May trade just doesn't. They gave up too much for Dustin May, who's not even pitching well, who's a free agent. And Steven Matz isn't enough to move the needle to a D. It's a bad trade deadline for Boston. It's a tough one. So Tampa made some moves, and they made some moves kind of late in trade deadline day. I mean, they made some moves earlier in the week too. They traded Danny Jansen to Milwaukee, and they added Nick Fortes, which I think is a little bit of a decline at your backup catcher position. They did add another catcher later on with Hunter Fiducia, who really blocked by the Dodgers. Dalton Rushing, Will Smith, he just was not going to play on their major league roster like that. They traded Paul Gervasi, Bent Orvet went out, which is not too much, but they traded Zach Littell to Cincinnati, who leads the league in home runs given up. Tampa, that George Steinbrenner field they're playing in, balls have been flying out of there. I think that was a trade that didn't really move the needle for them too much in any direction. Trading Caballero for Everson, Perea, and a player to be named later doesn't really do much. But the two trades that are pretty interesting when it comes down to the Rays, they brought in Adrian Hauser, as having a really good year for the White Sox this year. The White Sox have been absolutely abysmal. And if Hauser was pitching like this from day one, he would have been an all-star, but he was like a late signing. And he did not make the all-star team, but he's probably been the best White Sox all year this season. The Rays traded Curtis Mead and a couple of pitching prospects. Not too crazy, but they brought in Griffin Jacks from Minnesota. Minnesota fire sale. Another one, Griffin Jacks gone. A really solid reliever whose ERA just jumped from like a high 3 to 4.5. This is why ERAs don't really matter much. He gave up a couple base runners, and then they brought in a position player to pitch in Cody Clemens, and some more runs scored, and his ERA flew up. But he has good stuff. They traded Taj Bradley, who was once for years a top prospect for the Rays, just hasn't been able to put it together. Change of scenery was warranted. I've seen reports that they were looking to move him for a while, or at least open to it, I should say. But them kind of getting a little worse at the backup catcher position, and then also trading Littell, but trying to buy. It's very Tampa Bay Rays like, but I don't think it was great for the way they did it. I think Hauser's a free agent at the end of the year. Griffin Jacks is controllable. People seem to think Fiducia is pretty good. I haven't really seen him play like that. I'm gonna give it a D or a C. I'm gonna give it a C, but I might move it down later. We'll see. All right, Baltimore, the Orioles, the Minnesota Twins sold, the Baltimore Orioles sold. Ryan O'Hearn got traded out with Ramon Laureano to San Diego. They got 6 prospects back, including a 6'8" left-handed pitcher in Boston Bateman. Cobb Hightower was another top 10 prospect for the Padres, or at least on the window of that. Victor Figueroa is a 6'5" corner outfielder and first base prospect who was a very like an 18th round pick last year in the draft or whatever in 2024, but he is hit in the minors. He said for power, he said for average, he has got doubles. I don't know too much about him, but his numbers look like he could turn into something maybe. And when you get 6 players back for 2 guys that are free agents anyways, you still might be able to bring back Ryan O'Hearn in free agency if you really want to this offseason. But you get 6 lottery tickets. Just one of them really hits. This is a win. And that's just one move they made. They also traded Cedric Mullins to the Mets for Ramon Gomez, Anthony Nunez, and Chandler Marsh. Anthony Nunez I saw was um like a hitting prospect, a position player in the Padres organization, and things weren't working. So he went to like D3 University of Tampa and pitched, got signed by the Padres. I think he has like an interesting changeup, I think I saw it was, or something. And then Ramon Gomez throws like 100 miles per hour. His control's an issue. But I mean, those if you can get Ramon Gomez in a couple of years to control his fastball, and I think there was like a changeup or something off of it. I mean, the Orioles are collecting lottery tickets here that can really work. They traded Dominguez for Warren Watts Brown, as I talked about. They also traded Gregory Soto for Wellington Arcena and Cameron Foster to the Mets. I think Arcena throws like high 90s. Traded Charlie Morton, who was expiring, for another prospect. Andrew Kittredge for a shortstop prospect, and Wilfred De La Cruz. They traded Ramon Urias. I mean, they just unloaded the tank on guys that really aren't a part of their future plan. I think I got to give this a. I think I just realized I said that the Yankees was an A and I put it at S, but I think they're both S's. I think the Orioles is a different type of S. I think it's a selling S. I don't think any of the things that they traded hurts their future at all. Therefore, it's a good trade deadline when you add this many prospects. I think there's a legit chance three of them become major leaguers that you can control for multiple years, and I don't think they gave up anything too crazy. So I think this is an S. Now the Detroit Tigers, who have one of the best records in the league as well, and in the American League, I was not impressed by their trade deadline. I know there was talks they were in on the Ryan Helsley stuff. They didn't get it done. They wanted too much or whatever. David Bednar, they wanted like Jose Braceno, I think I saw, which is like a top prospect for the Tigers as well. And they just didn't want to trade from their prospect depth. But the American League is the weaker league out of the two leagues. The National League have the Phillies, the Mets, the Dodgers, the Padres. These are like big Titan teams. The American League is very winnable. That's why the Yankees went all in. That's why you saw the Blue Jays add multiple big time relievers and a big time starter. And the Detroit Tigers, they kind of penny pinched with their moves. Like they made moves, but I don't really like any of the moves they made. Charlie Morton has won 2 World Series. He's a veteran, but he loses batters. He'll get ahead like 0-2, and then he'll throw like a slider, like hit someone in the back of the foot. Like he just makes these little mistakes, but he has a lot of experience. Paul Sewald was on the 2023 Diamondbacks that went to the World Series and lost to the Rangers. Rafael Montero added a splitter this year. He's been in playoff games. He's looked good at times for the Braves, but other times not great. You added Chris Paddock from Minnesota, who's been a decent starter in his career, but not great this year. He did look good in his first start for the Tigers a couple days ago. I'll say that. They also added Randy Dobnak from that trade. Like they added a lot. I think the biggest get they got was Kyle Finnegan, who's born in Detroit. They got from Washington a, a pretty good Nationals closer in their history. They traded like Josh Randall and RJ Sales, a couple pitching prospects. I don't think they gave up anything crazy on their prospect front, but that's kind of explains why they didn't get anything significant. They got a lot of options and not a lot of like this. Like, I know for a fact this guy's going to pitch in the playoffs for you and do good. I would worry for the Tigers that one of these guys they got is going to give up a big hit in the playoffs. Like, I bet Charlie Morton is out there facing whoever, like the Yankees or somebody, and he's ahead 0-2 and he throws the slider and it hits him in the leg or something. Like I don't know. I really feel like one of these guys might give up a big hit in the playoffs. I don't love it. It was kind of cheap of me, or I felt like they did some cheap moves. They should have went and got Bednar or something if they really want to go for it this year, which they should go for it this year. But it is what it is. All right, now the Cleveland Guardians, man, they had Luis Ortiz is getting investigated for gambling, and now Emmanuel Clase, one of the best closers in baseball for this entire decade, and it's a guy that's still pretty young, mid-20s, I think, maybe 26 or 27. I mean, if he gets banned from baseball or suspended from baseball, it's gonna be a big loss for the sport, for like real fans. Like Clase is a great closer, but they were gonna trade him, and they were probably gonna get a big price back. You see what Helsley went for. We'll talk about that. You see what Johan Duran went for. We'll talk about that. But they could have got a big price for Class A, and I'm interested to see where Class A would have landed. But it kind of handcuffed them. They were talking about maybe they would trade Quan, Bieber. They ended up trading Bieber to Toronto, as we talked about, for Cal Stephen. They also traded Paul Sewald to Detroit. So the two moves that they made, I've kind of already discussed from the other side. I would say it's a C. I mean, they didn't really have much to move, so I'm not going to punish them by giving them a D. At least you got like a top 5 prospect for Shane Bieber in someone's organization, and Getting anything for Seawald is kind of a win. I might drop this to a D. It's been a tough week for them though with the Class A stuff, and they were pretty much handicapped, handcuffed with it. It's not really their fault on that front, but man, two pitchers being investigated for betting on games. That's a tough look. That's tough. And I think they have a sponsor that's like a Bet 360 sponsor or something for the team as well. I'm pretty sure I've seen something like that. So that's crazy. All right, the Kansas City Royals. The Royals made a trade I really like. They got a package back that I wish my team, which we'll talk about later, I wish they did this trade, but sending out, the player we would have sent out instead of the Royals sending out Freddie Fermin. They got Ryan Bergert and Steven Kolick from the Padres. And the Padres, their system, they know how to turn out pitchers. They know how to make pitchers reach their peak. Their Padres pitching, their bullpen is ridiculously good. And Ryan Bergert wasn't really on people's radar like that. And the Padres have made him a really good. He pitched like 11 games, has like an ERA somewhere in the twos, very solid. And Stephen Kolick, 2 years. I think he was a Rule 5 pick last year, and he's been a solid reliever for the Padres. Nothing too crazy. I think his ERA has been like the fours both years, but solid. And trading Freddie Fermin, he was your backup catcher to Salvi. He would catch him. Salvi wasn't in the lineup. He's respected. This is like his fourth season in the league. I don't think trading Freddie Fermin is too big of a loss for the Royals to not do this. I think this is a good trade for the Royals. They also got Bailey Falter, so they got another pitcher. They traded Evan Sisk and a first base prospect who I think he's like 6'3" or 6'5" or something. Looks like he might have some power. I think when I looked at his stuff, Callan Moss. They also got Randall Grichuk. So they got Randall Grichuk and they got Mike Yastrzemski. So they were doing some buying on outfielders. I don't. It's like they're kind of going for it this year, but they're kind of not. Was that I think I don't know. I don't like the half go for it, half don't type of vibe. It's weird, but I really like the trade they got from the Padres. And Falter's a solid starter as well. I mean, Grichuk and Yastrzemski's they're good. They're good players. They're really solid major league players. I think they're both free agents at the end of the year, though. So with that being said, I'm gonna give it like a C. I'm gonna give it a C. I really like that Padres package. I don't know exactly. We'll see what Burger really turns into, and we'll see if Kolek keeps doing what Kolek's doing. But I think they made some solid moves. Just weird philosophy on kind of going for it, kind of not. Whatever. All right, the Minnesota Twins. The Minnesota Twins made some moves. This is gonna be it's gonna be kind of hard to gauge. Obviously, they kicked it off by trading Johan Duran to Philadelphia for Mick Abel, and Eduardo Tait. Now, Mick Abel's been a big prospect in the Phillies organization for some years. I think he's going to be like a solid back end starter in a rotation, a 3 to 5. Maybe he can kind of blow past that and be a 2 or something. But Eduardo Tait is somebody I really like. I've seen some highlights of Tait a couple months ago, and I've looked into him a little bit, and I think the fielding is what he kind of needs to work on. But he's still really young, but he looks like he has a nice bat. He can hit for some power, even to like the gaps. Like I saw him hit a ball in like right center, and it was gone. Like I don't know how far it was exactly, but it was a bomb. And I think he can be like a legit. Maybe he's a first baseman in the future, not a catcher. But I think there's a potential for Tait to be a really solid major leaguer. And I think that's a solid trade. I mean, Duran still has a couple more years of control, so trading Johan Duran is tough. But the Twins, the position they're in, I thought they had a really good chance to win the division in 2024, and they didn't. Cleveland and Kansas City were both better than them, and Detroit was as well. So they were like the fourth best team in their division. And they kind of been in the same boat again this year. They've underperformed drastically. They traded Paddock. We talked about that. Willie Castro, they sent out to Chicago. The Griffin Jacks, we talked about that. Harrison Bader to Philly. They got Hendry Mendez back in that trade, who was originally a Milwaukee Brewers international signing. He got traded to the Phillies in the Oliver Dunn trade. He's like 6'3", but he doesn't have like any power. I think he can run pretty decent. They got another pitching prospect back in that. They traded Brock Stewart to the Dodgers. They got James Outman back. We had like 20 home runs in 2023, but hasn't been good since in the major leagues. And Kershaw just got mad at him a couple weeks ago for something he did in the outfield. I feel exactly what he did. I don't like the fact they traded Luis Varland. I think they should have kept on to him. And then they traded Carlos Correa. They got a salary relief on that, and they're not retooling. It looks like a full-on rebuild just because of everything they've traded. So with that being said, and with what they did here, Uh, I'm gonna give it a D. They got a lot of stuff, but I don't love what they got back more than the Orioles at all. And I think they traded a couple more players in total than the Orioles traded. And I like Tait and Mick Abels can be a solid guy, but I don't love what they got back. I think Taj Bradley and a change of scenery, though, I should say. I think Taj Bradley has a chance to be like a solid 3 to 5 in the rotation as well. Just wasn't working for him in Tampa. A change of scenery can really work for some guys. I think Taj Bradley could be one of those guys, but I'm gonna give it a D. Maybe I shouldn't make it a C. We'll think about that. I think I'm gonna keep it a D though. All right, the White Sox. Now, the White Sox, they've been a little better this year, but they're still the gutter of the major leagues. Unfortunately, they traded Hauser. They got Curtis Mead back, infielder, a couple pitching prospects. They traded Austin Slater for Gage Zeal, a Yankees pitching prospect. I think he's a lefty. I could be wrong about that. I think it's kind of an indifferent trade deadline. Hauser probably wasn't coming back. Slater, I think he was a free agent as well. Probably wasn't coming back. I don't think they really had too much. They could the Luis Robert, not trading Luis Robert. Luis Robert was the possession for the White Sox, and he he just isn't doing what people want him to do for teams to trade for him. He's like a 20 million option. I think some teams were definitely viewing him as a rental rather than, oh, this is a guy we can have for a couple more years at 20 million. He's just not playing to that 20 million level, but he can be like like one of the best center fielders in the game if he just plays to the level he can play to. He's just not doing that. He's just not playing to that level. So not trading Robert, they're gonna bank on him to be better. They'll trade him. Maybe he's a good second half. You trade him in the offseason. Maybe you wait till next year and do this all over again. I think they were pretty indifferent. For a team that bad, you would like to be able to have stuff to sell to get more stuff back. And they just didn't really acquire any like prospects. Like they got a couple of guys, but not enough for a team of that caliber. Like they need to get more to stockpile themselves and to get out of this position they're in. They just didn't get enough for me. All right, the Houston Astros was a very interesting one. They seemed very aggressive. They were very persistent on wanting to get Dylan Cease. There was a lot of smoke behind that all day on trade deadline day. I thought it was going to happen. They could pivot to Sandy Alcantara was a thing. I thought they could do that. They didn't do either. They did not get a starting pitcher, but they brought Carlos Correa back to Houston. One of the, the most historic Astros of all time, big time playoff performer. We know what team he was on that, isn't very respected in Astros history, but he signed through like 2032, but there's options starting after the 2028 season. There's requirements, like I think it's a certain amount of plate appearances, top 5 MVP voting. I think there's a good chance the Astros can get out of this contract after 2028, but they're trying to win it this year. I've said it before in this video. The Astros, the American League is wide open. I think there's a couple of teams that could definitely take it. I think the Astros are certainly one of the favorites. The Yankees are certainly one of the favorites. I think the Blue Jays could get it done. The Tigers having good pieces, but I don't like what they did. I don't think the Tigers are going to make the World Series this year based off the moves they made. Carlos Correa is going to play third base for you. You get Alvarez back in mid-August or so. They added Ramon Urias as well, who's having a really solid season. Can play a few positions, and I really love the acquisition they made of Jesus Sanchez from the Marlins. That guy can play. He can swing the bat. He's in Miami, so people don't really see much of him. But Jesus Sanchez can play. He's a nice swing. He hits for some power. He does some things. Even if he's not starting for the Astros, if you need him to come in and pinch hit, I would like his chances of getting a hit. And they traded Ryan Gusto. Chase Jaworski was like a top 15 prospect, I think, for them. But is he going to become anything? I don't know. And as well as Mil Valencia. Whatever. They're going for it this year. I'm gonna make it an A. Now, whether this Correa trade doesn't age well for them, that's not what this is about for this year. Like they elevated their chances of winning the World Series this year. They elevated their chances of making the World Series this year by making the moves they made. I really like the Urias bringing him in for depth. I really like the Jesus Sanchez trade. Carlos Correa is Carlos Correa. I I would maybe even I would maybe drop this to a B just because they didn't get more pitching. And I think they need more pitching. Ryan Presley just got DFA'd by the Cubs, another former Astro. Wouldn't be surprised if the Astros claim him. But I'm gonna make it a B. Actually, I'm gonna drop it to a B. I'm gonna drop it to a B just because they didn't get any pitching. But I really like a few of the moves they made. All right, the Seattle Mariners. The Mariners, they picked the pockets of the Diamondbacks a few times here this trade deadline. They brought back Eugenio Suarez for Tyler Locklear, Hunter Cranon, and Juan Burgos. Locklear was like a top 7 prospect for them, I think. And then Cranon and Burgos were like 16 and 17 in their system. They also brought in Josh Naylor from Arizona in a separate trade for Brandon Garcia, who had just pitched like 2 games for the Mariners big league club before this trade, and Ashton Izzy, who I think's in like Double A or something. They needed another bullpen arm, and unfortunately, last night Trent Thornton tore his Achilles on the last. There was 2 outs, a ground ball was hit to the first baseman. Naylor went and got it because they were shifting Adolis Garcia. Thornton realized late he had to take off the first base to cover, and he tore his Achilles. That's a tough loss. He had a really solid 23, really solid 24 for them. He's been solid this year in 25, not quite as good. He had heat exhaustion a couple weeks ago in the field. I think it was at Wrigley, and then he's been really good since then. So that's a tough loss on Trent Thornton. They needed a lefty in the pen. They got that in Caleb Ferguson. They have obviously a really good closer in Andres Munoz. Adding Naylor and adding Suarez. People have been begging Seattle for years to get bats. The starting pitching, the rotation in Seattle is one of the best in the league and has been for multiple years. They need to get bats. They got Rosarena, who's a big-time playoff performer last year's trade deadline. Adding Suarez and Naylor, both rentals, both free agents at the end of the year. I could see maybe Naylor coming back. We'll see about Suarez. But as for this year, they got bats and they got an arm. I think it's an A. I think Toronto's is a little better. I would say of a deadline, maybe, maybe not. But I think they're pretty on par with each other at the A. That leads us to the Texas Rangers home. All right, Texas Rangers. They made a few moves. They brought in Phil Matone, who from St. Louis, who's been in the league as a reliever for some years now, but ever since 2023 is like a 3.10 ERA, very solid. They brought in Danny Colombe. Danny Colombe, I think is how you pronounce it. Actually, my fault. Danny Colombe has an ERA under 1 this year. He's a good lefty. He's a good lefty. So they get 2 bullpen arms, and then they get like 34-year-old Merrill Kelly, 35-year-old Merrill Kelly, however old he is, who pitched for the Diamondbacks in their playoff run in 23. So they got pitching, and they traded some pitching prospects, a couple top 10. I think Cole Drake was like the 5th or 6th rated prospect in the Rangers organization. Mitch Bratt, I think, was top 10 as well. And Hageman, I think he was like 15th or something. I could be wrong about the Hageman part. But they needed a bat as well. I think Texas needed a bat. I thought maybe Marcell Ozuna from the Braves was an option. I thought there were some other options out there. Jesus Sanchez was out there. Evidently, I think that would have been a good fit for Texas. They just needed another bat, in my opinion. They're not quite as dynamic as they were in 2023 when they won the World Series. And Jake Burger's hurt right now, but I don't love him being the first baseman in their playoff run. I don't love Rowdy Tellez being the first baseman in their playoff run. I liked it better when it was Nathaniel Lowe than those 2 options. Burger hit like 35 home runs or something a couple years ago for the Marlins, but he's not quite as having that he had like 11 home runs or something for the Rangers. He was on pace for maybe like 25 or something. He just doesn't get on base enough for me for that position. They're just not as dynamic. I think they needed another bat and they didn't do it. So I'm gonna give it a C. They got 2 quality relievers, a quality starter, but I think they need another bat. Seattle beat them last night. Shut them. The Texans did not score last night. They got shut out. Seattle's the better team. They're in a race for the last wild card spot. There's a chance Texas could catch Boston, like I said earlier, but I think they didn't do themselves any favors on that last night. All right, the Angels. The Angels are so weird. They're such a weird organization. They should be selling. They could probably have sold on Kenley Jansen. Taylor Ward, somebody I thought they were going to trade last year. They didn't do it. I just processed the fact they didn't trade Taylor Ward. They should have traded him again this year. He's having a great year. They didn't do it. They're trying to get Mike Trout back to the playoffs. But then they didn't really buy either. Like, they brought in Andrew Chaffin and former Angel Luis Garcia from the Nationals. They traded Jake Eder and Sam Brown. Not a crazy package to give up. It's okay additions, but they're just not good enough as a team to make a run. And then they brought in Oswald Peraza, who I kind of like this because the New York media has been tough on Peraza. He's had a tough year. Change of scenery, can benefit people. I like the fact that the Angels brought him in. I don't know much about the dude they traded for him in Wilberson De Pena, but I don't mind the idea of bringing Peraza in. But they didn't sell. They could have sold on Kenley Jansen. They could have sold on Taylor Ward. Maybe Joe Adele could have gotten a good price back. They just bought, and they barely bought. I don't like what the Angels did. I'm gonna give it an F. I just don't like what they did. Like, it wasn't enough. And if you're buying, buy. They barely did. Like, these moves are not gonna move the needle for them. Like, they're just hoping they have enough talent as it is, and they just don't. It's just not enough. All right, now the Athletics, the last American League team we talk about, the Athletics. I know it says Oakland there. We know they're not in Oakland no more. They're in Sacramento, but they won't even claim that. The biggest splash of the day. They traded Mason Miller, and they traded JP Sears, who can eat innings a lefty, but they traded Mason Miller, who can throw up to like 104. And it was a great idea because they got Leo Dallas DeVries back. Leo Dallas DeVries is the third prospect in baseball, a guy I wanted my team, the Braves, to sign in international free agency in 2024. And he went to the Padres. He was the number one guy in international free agency that year. He looks like a shortstop is going to be an absolute stud. He makes some nice catches at shortstop. He can hit. I think out of everybody that's traded prospect wise, I mean, he's the third prospect, and there's been a top 5 prospect traded since 2017, and that was Eloy Jimenez. And Eloy Jimenez did not work out. He had a couple okay seasons, but he's not even in the league right now. So I mean, this is I'm gonna give it a. Should I go S? I'm gonna go S. Like, bro, Leo Dallas DeVries, I think is gonna be really, really good. And then when I look back at this video in a few years, this is the player I'm really interested to see how this turns out. I think he's gonna be really good. They also got Braden Net. It was a cool little story. Wasn't drafted or anything. Went to like some draft leagues or something and got signed for $10,000 by the Padres, and now is like the third prospect in the organization. Could pitch in the major leagues this year. If not, we'll see him next year. Henry Baez and Eduardo Nunez, who pitched 4 games in the major leagues this year. This is good value. I mean, Mason Miller, the Padres are going to stretch him out and make him a starter next year. And he's probably going to be a really good starter in the major leagues, but you'll see him every 5th day. The Athletics are moving to Las Vegas in a few years. They have the big Amish Nick Kurtz playing first base, who's going to win Rookie of the Year this year. They have Jacob Wilson, who's having Rookie of the Year stolen from him by Nick Kurtz, playing shortstop. Maybe he shifts to second. Maybe DeVries shifts somewhere else. And then you have DeVries. Like, Zach Geloff can play third base or whoever. But this team, when they get to Las Vegas, it's going to be very interesting. And I love this trade for them. I mean, we'll talk about the Padres in a second. I got them at the end for a reason. They made a interesting splash, I'll say. AJ Preller, you're a madman. All right, but the New York Mets. They brought in a couple of relievers. They started off by bringing in Gregory Soto. We talked about how the Orioles got Aracena and Cam Foster, so I won't speak too much on that. As well as the package the Mets got for Cedric Mullins, who, I'll say this. They were doing a segment on MLB Network about what role player last year was Tommy Edman. What role player this year can be in the playoffs and make a huge difference? And I said to myself, it's going to be Cedric Mullins. This was before he got traded to the Mets, but it was heavily reported that he'd end up on the Mets. Most likely at the time, he did. I mean, this guy can defend well. He's aging a little bit. He's like, what, young 30s, 31 or something. He can run. He can defend. He made a crazy home run robbery in his last game for the Orioles. He's a left-handed bat. Used to be a switch hitter. Has been a left-handed bat only since like 2021. His average is down a little bit this year. Everyone's average is down this year, though. So, I mean, hey. But I think he's going to be a really good, he can platoon a little bit with Tyrone Taylor. They play Jeff McNeil out there a little bit. They have Nemo. I think he's a really good depth piece. They're bringing in Tyler Rogers as well. Now, Tyler Rogers, the arm angle is crazy. The dude's almost touching the ground. He's like even lower than a sidearm. He's like submarine, crazy angle. I love this addition for them as well. Just having different looks in the pen is so important, especially when you have Diaz and Rogers. They're both righties. Reed Garrett's a righty. You have Soto as a lefty, and Brooks Raley just came back, who's a lefty. The Mets bullpen is deep, and it doesn't even include the fact that they added Ryan Helsley as well, who is probably just going to be a rental and probably won't sign back next year. We'll see. But, I mean you're going to have, Rogers maybe in the 7th, maybe Reed Garrett in the 7th, Raley if it's a lefty, Soto if it's a lefty. And then Helsley in the 8th and Diaz in the 9th. That's disgusting. That's gonna be big time in the playoffs when you face off against these monsters, the Phillies, the Dodgers, the Padres. It's gonna be big time stuff. They traded Jose Buto to San Francisco in the Rogers trade, along with Drew Gilbert, who is the outfield prospect they got back in the Verlander trade a couple years ago. Blake Tidwell, who pitched a couple major league games, could maybe become a solid starter in the majors for the Giants. We'll see what happens there. And then the Cardinals got Jesus Baez, who I think can turn out to be a pretty good player in the major leagues as well. We'll see. I think he's the guy out of all these guys the Mets traded that has the best chance of sort of backfiring on them. It's the anniversary as well when they made this trade of the Javi Baez for PCA trade. There's a little tidbit in there, but you also got Nate Dome, who was I think it was a 4th-round pick in 2024 by the Mets, and then Frank Ellisalt. But I think Baez and Dome, or not Dome, excuse me. I think Baez and Tidwell, maybe like Aracena and Gomez can be some good relievers. But I think this, they're going for it. They're going all in, trying to win the World Series this year to the point where I'm gonna give this an S. I mean, Helsley, Rogers, Soto, Mullins. That's a pretty good deadline for a team that's very much going for it this year. A team that hasn't won the World Series since 1986. They won it, and they're going for it, and I respect it. Now, the Philadelphia Phillies. It was almost like the Mets were responding to everything the Phillies was doing. The Phillies would make a trade, and the Mets was countering. Phillies got Duran, Mets got Helsley, then the Phillies got Harrison Bader, Mets got Cedric Mullins. It was some countering going on there. Phillies are obviously without Jose Alvarado in the playoffs because PED suspension. They'll be back from pretty soon. Not exactly sure when, but yeah. So the Phillies getting Duran, who's under control a few more years, is absolutely huge. I mean, I talked about how much I love Eduardo Tait. Realmuto is a free agent at the end of the year, I believe. I'm sure the Phillies would love to bring him back. Mick Abel is nice, but he's a starting pitcher. You get a closer. A closer. Jordan Romano has struggled this year. Alvarado was not going to be there. I think the Phillies did a great job by getting Johan Duran. They also added Matt Manning, who hasn't pitched in the major leagues this year and struggled in AAA for the Tigers. But, who knows? Maybe he can be something for you. And then adding Harrison Bader is a great defender. For Henry Mendez, who I say 6'3", doesn't have power, and another pitching prospect is a solid get. I thought Mullins would, like, before hearing the reports of Mullins and the Mets and before the Bader trade, before the Mullins trade, I was kind of envisioning Cedric Mullins would be the guy the Phillies would land. I know they have Brandon Marsh as another left-handed bat, which probably makes it complicated. They probably want to add a right-handed bat, and I understand that. You have Rojas, though. Rojas and Mullins is right-left. So it is what it is. Bader's still a really good defender, and he's hit pretty well this year for Minnesota. Again, Duran is huge, which I'm going to make this a B. I mean, Duran's kind of an A, but just getting Bader and not doing anything else when Alvarado cannot pitch. And they did sign David Robertson, and he'll, I'm sure will be with the big league club soon in the next couple of weeks, which is an addition as well. But it's not trade deadline acquisition, so it doesn't count into this. I mean, I think they needed another move or so. Maybe another bat, maybe another reliever. But I think Duran was a fantastic get for them, so that is what it is. All right, the Marlins. The Marlins made just 2 trades. They traded Nick Fortes, the catcher, to Tampa for an outfield prospect. And then they traded Jesus Sanchez for Ryan Gusto, Jaworski, and Valencia. Gusto, he got called up last year. He was going to pitch game 162 for Houston. They got rained out against Cleveland. He pitched a good amount of starts this year. And his ERA is like high 4s or something. You still had some control left on Jesus Sanchez, and I really like Jesus Sanchez. I don't know enough about Jaworski at the shortstop position, so I'm gonna give them a C on this. They didn't trade Alcantara or Edward Cabrera. I think I would have probably traded Edward Cabrera, depending what you got from him. I completely understand keeping Alcantara for longer because he hasn't been good this year, and you can probably get a bigger package next year. Or if he pitches a really good second half the rest of this year in the offseason, get a big package. So I kind of like that they held on to Alcantara, especially if the package wasn't good enough for Edward Cabrera, who's finally putting together for you this year. Then I can respect keeping him as well. But I mean, you get 3 players for Jesus Sanchez, Augusto. I mean, the Marlins low key. I don't know if they're what's up with their pitching lab, but they've really. I mean, other than Alcantara, because he's been not good. They have some like relievers that are like low key pitching very well, and stuff. So, if they can probably get Gusto to pitch better than he has for Houston this year. So I'm gonna give it a C because they did get prospects, and I don't mind that they held on to some certain guys. I'm actually gonna drop it to a D. I'm gonna drop it to a D. All right, the Atlanta Braves, my Atlanta Braves. This is my team. It's an F. You had to trade Marcelo Zuna. You had to trade Rocio Iglesias. I could understand maybe if Iglesias pitches really good down the line this year, maybe we try to bring him back. I think Ozuna's probably gone, and not getting anything for them is tough when you had the chance to trade them and get stuff for them. We did get Tyler Kinley, who was like a $5 million option next year, and if he has pitched well outside of Coors Field for the Rockies this year, so maybe we can see something. We turned Pierce Johnson from Rocky to a really good reliever for us. Maybe we can do the same thing with Tyler Kinley. We traded a 26, I think he is 26-year-old Austin Smith, who probably wasn't going to pitch in the major leagues for us. Maybe he'll get a chance in Colorado, and we got something for Rafael Montero, who hasn't been great for the Braves, and a lot of people want to DFA. And we get a scrappy 21, I think he is 21-year-old gritty infielder, Jim Jarvis, who played at the University of Alabama. Don't know if he'll ever play in the major leagues for us, but it'll be good depth for Gwinnett. We need organizational depth. We brought in Eric Fetty and Carlos Carrasco. We just need them to pitch innings. They won't be back next year. The Dane Dunning trade isn't listed here, but we did bring in Dane Dunning. He did not pitch good last night. Don't know if we'll see him in a Braves uniform again either. It's an F, though. It was a terrible deadline. I probably need to speed this up. I don't know how many minutes we're at, but I know this is a long video. And all right, so the Washington Nationals, they traded Mike Soroka to Chicago for a couple of top 15 prospects and Christian Franklin and Ronnie Cruz. They traded Ahmed Rosario for Clayton Beeter and Bro Martinez. I think Beeter's a solid pickup for the Rosario. And then they traded Alex Call for Eric Swan and Sean Paul Lennon for the Dodgers. Alex Call sneakily had a really solid year this year. Getting a couple pitching prospects back for him, sure. The Finnegan, they got loaded. They loaded up on some prospects here, and I don't think anybody they traded is too significant. Kyle Finnegan probably stings a little bit for Nashville fans to see him go. His strikeout rate is down this year. He hasn't been quite as good as he has been. Getting what they got for Soroka, though, I really like, because Soroka, he was a really good Brave, but then he had some arm injuries, and he wants to be a starter, not a reliever. But he hasn't been he'll eat innings for you, but not great. I think just getting the amount of prospects they got for guys that aren't a part of their future plan. They could have traded Mackenzie Gore. I kind of like that they didn't, but I think one day maybe they should, depending what the package can be. I respect it. All right, Milwaukee Brewers. They brought in Shelby Miller, who has resurrected his career and been a very good reliever for the Diamondbacks this year. And they basically didn't trade anything, player to be named or cash, but what they had to do was take on the Jordan Montgomery part of that salary to get Shelby Miller for free, which was kind of a savvy move. Montgomery's out for the year with elbow surgery or whatever, and then they traded Nestor Cortez, who pitched 2 games for him and then got hurt. And they traded a shortstop prospect to San Diego for Brandon Lockridge, who has some good wheels, and then brought in Danny Jansen to give him some good catcher depth. I think they need to do more, man. They're in a race for the division. They're in the race. The National League is deep. I think they needed to do more. They didn't do enough. I think Shelby Miller added his shirt was savvy, but they needed to make a splash, and they didn't make a splash. They needed to do something. They really didn't do anything of significance. And the Cubs, kind of in the same boat. They did add Taylor Rogers, who got swung around from Cincinnati. We'll talk about that in a second, to Pittsburgh, and they added him. He's a lefty, twin of Tyler Rogers. They added Soroka. He'll eat innings, I guess, but train 2 top 15 prospects, and they're necessarily going to be those prospects are not going to necessarily be anything. I don't really love the Soroka ad. Andrew Kitteridge, I do like that ad, and Willie Castro, I really like that ad. He can play multiple positions, super utility guy, good player. I think this is definitely going to be a C because they should have probably done more, but it was solid, I suppose. All right, the Cincinnati Reds. Hot take. I didn't really like the Reds deadline. The move I like the most is probably the move people don't care about the most. Bring in Miguel Andujar. That's a solid ball player right there. He had a big 2018 with the Yankees, and career hasn't really progressed since. But he's had a very sneakily solid 2 years in Oakland / Sacramento. He's hitting like 290 this year with 6 home runs, but he's only played like 50 or 60 games. Ball flies in Cincinnati. I think he can be a very good bat addition. But they added Zach Littell, who leads the league in home runs given up, and he's going to a ballpark in Great American Ballpark where home runs happen a little too much Brian Hayes, really, really good defender, but he's like getting a little too much money up until like 2028 or something. I don't mind me sure what the year is, but just um, you have two top five third base prospects coming up in Cam Collier and Sal Stewart. I don't really love the moves they made, to be honest. I do like the Andujar move. He's a free agent at the end of the year, anyways. I mean, Brian Hayes is a really good defender. I mean, I'm gonna make it move it to a C, and we'll see. Littell probably still be a solid pitcher that eats innings, so I'll make it a C. Maybe it's a little bit of overreaction. All right, Cardinals. I think the haul they got back for Ryan Helsley was a free agent to be anyways. Is very solid. Like I said, Jesus Baez, I think can make the Mets pay a little bit, but the Mets are going for it, so the Mets won't be bothered. They traded Steven Matz for Blaze Jordan. Get a look at Blaze Jordan, sure. Why not? Steven Matz, he's older, getting fed. They traded Fetty. Fetty wasn't doing much. And they traded Phil Maton, Phil Maton. I don't know why I keep saying his name wrong. For Mason Molina and Skylar Hales. I think Mason Molina, low key, I've seen his numbers. I'm pretty sure he has pretty good minor league numbers. So he's a guy maybe they could be a future major leaguer for the Cardinals. I think the package they got back for Helsley, I'll give it a B. I like Mason Molina from what I saw, which was a much. Blaze Jordan, maybe could be something. Cardinals are kind of good at developing these kind of utility type guys and making them decent major leaguers. All right, the Pirates. What are the Pirates doing? What are they doing? I mean, the Bailey Falter trade, they have a lot of excess pitching. They flipped Taylor Rogers, which was cool, whatever. They traded Caleb Ferguson for a prospect in Jeter Martinez, cool. They need bats. And you get Sammy Stafura in the Brian Hayes trade, which is a shortstop prospect. I don't know too much about him. But the Rafael Flores, the trading Bednar to the Yankees, you get Rafael Flores back. I saw he's major league ready. You might see him at the end of the year, maybe next year. Needs to work on his defense. Solid bat. Interesting piece moving forward for the Pirates. And something interesting I saw about Edglin Perez. This guy has like 65 walks and it's like 62 hits this year. So his on base is like 100 points higher than his slug. Very interesting player profile. And outfield prospect Brian Sanchez. I think he's in like single A. I mean, I'm gonna give it a C just because like they got some bats in Flores and Callan Moss maybe can become something. The guy they got back in the Falter trade. They got rid of Brian Hayes money, but it's because they're cheap and not because it's sad. I guess it's a little savvy. Brian Hayes really has not been able to hit, which is I should go back to the Cincinnati thing. Brian Hayes needs to hit, and he did hit a home run in his debut for Cincinnati last night in the crazy game against the Braves. But I mean, I don't know. Pirates they need to sell the team, bro. All right, the Dodgers. The Dodgers didn't really do anything. What kind of world are we in? It's because they're so loaded. They did trade Dustin May for James Tibbs, which was kind of a steal. So that was good for them. They brought back Brock Stewart, who's been really good for the Twins the last couple of years. Former Dodger, came up with the Dodgers. He's like a -1 WAR with the Dodgers in his career. They trade James Outman, who wasn't fitting the puzzle for the Dodgers anyways. And they bring in Alex Cole, who could be a very good 4th, 5th outfielder for the Dodgers. I think it was a solid. They also added Adam Soronowski from Cincinnati, a top 10 prospect for the Reds in that 3-team trade, in the Littell trade. I think it's a C. Nothing crazy about the Dodgers. Alex Call can be a good pickup. So, yeah. All right, Giants. They traded a long-time Giant, Mike Yastrzemski. Tyler Rogers got shipped out. They traded Doval. The prospect they got back from the Yankees, Jesus Rodriguez. I saw a video of him today. Very interesting batting stance. A couple other prospects as well. Very weird. They made the Devers trade and then they kind of sold, but it's because they haven't performed to the level they want to. I think it's a C, a low C, a very low C. All right, Diamondbacks. They trade Suarez, they trade Kelly, they trade Shelby Miller, they get rid of the Montgomery contract. Naylor gone, Grichuk gone. They bring back Tyler Locklear, could be a power bat for them. Some good pitching prospects all around. I think they really maximized what they had in a way that I'm gonna give it a B. And they did some interesting stuff. Then the Rockies. Trading McMahon, Kenley gone, Jake Bird gone. They're bringing Rock Riggio from the Yankees, a top 15 prospect. Griffin Herring, former LSU Tiger pitcher when they won the College World Series. I think they did some good maximizing with what they had. But same time, nothing too crazy. I'm going to give it a C. and then the San Diego Padres. Ladies and gentlemen, what didn't the Padres do on deadline day? They traded 6 prospects for O'Hearn and Laureano. He traded the number 3 prospect in baseball for Mason Miller and JP Sears. They brought in Nestor Cortez. They brought in Fermin. They're going for it. Now, Cobb Hightower is another prospect I didn't mention that went to the Orioles. That could be something in the future. We'll see. But the package they got back in Mason Miller, what Mason Miller can do for them, and they're going for it this year. I mean, I respect it. This is something that could haunt them in a few years with DeVries, but they're going for it this year, and you got to love that. I mean, AJ Preller is so insane. The guy is extremely insane. He makes crazy moves. The list of prospects he has traded and what they turned out to be in the major leagues is insane. But he goes for it. He went for it. DeVries out. Mason Miller in. O'Hearn and Laureano. And Ramon Laureano's had a really good year for Baltimore this year. Really good. Sent like 290. Hits for some power. He did that with Atlanta when he got to Atlanta last year. He was very solid for the Braves. On offense, for me, the Padres need catching. Elias Diaz, Maldonado's got DFA'd, and Luis Campusano hasn't really done it for them. I don't know how much of an upgrade Fermin is. Giving up Burger could end up hurting, maybe not. Maybe Fermin fits perfectly with them. We'll see. They were talking about maybe trading Cease, maybe trading Robert Suarez. They didn't. I kind of like they didn't do that. Go for it. Go all in this year. If Cease hopefully pitches better for them in the second half of the year, he hasn't pitched good this year. They could have got some prospects back and restocked the farm that they just emptied. But hey, the bullpen is disgusting, and the Padres very well might win the World Series this year. I'm gonna give it a B just because they gave up so much. But hey, if they win the World Series, who cares? And that's the tier list. That was a lot of talking. My voice is going through it. So I'm gonna end it there. But let's see how this ages for real, for real.